Early access games on Steam have a serious problem.
This is a bit of a rabbit hole. So I'm
Oh, a rabbit a hole. Here we go, chat. A little bit of a rabbit hole.
This is a bit of a rabbit hole. So I'm gonna need you guys to buckle in a little bit.
Okay, let's buckle in.
I saw a story that was talking about how Moon Studios, the makers of Ori and No Rest for the Wicked, were essentially going to have to shut down because
That is a huge exaggeration, misinterpretation, and miscommunication. Just want to put that out there. I've been following the story very closely with Moon Studios, No Rest for the Wicked. I even have an interview with the developer. No Rest for the Wicked is not in any immediate shutting down
of negative reviews, and that their CEO was essentially begging for positive reviews to keep the studio open. And I felt like that story was missing a little bit of context.
Yes.
I was seeing these headlines all over the place, but it was all based on just a couple of messages from their No Rest for the Wicked Discord. So I went out and I started doing a little bit of digging. And I ended up reaching out to their CEO, and he reached back, and we ended up having a 3-hour conversation talking about review bombing, media smear campaigns, the benefits and the drawbacks of early access, player reception, and more. This entire story was taken out of context. Part of that fault does lie with the CEO and his work.
100%. His work. Oh, look at this screenshot. The CEO has a bit of a problem, Mr. Thomas. Be it that it is his second language, English is not his primary language. So there's a bunch of, when you, as an ESL speaker, I understand that sometimes you try to convey something and it doesn't come across as well. And, a lot of it is because of his, English is not his primary language. So he probably is thinking in his language, and then, you know how that works out.
Words, but a lot of it has to do with just, legacy media doing what it's doing best, which is not doing due diligence and reporting on things for face value. Yeah. Luckily for you guys, I already had a video planned on early access. I wanted to talk about some of these scams, some of the abandonware, how we interact and how we interface with these games. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, we're going to talk about the early access, chat, and problems with early access.
About all things early access. We're talking about the controversy of Moon Studios, how the players have far more power than they realize, and how media spin can get out of control. Yet again, thanks to your support, Displate has reached out with another promotion to celebrate my birthday and theirs.
His birthday?
Grab something that'll actually make your walls look happy. Happy birthday to Displate. No Rest for the Wicked dropped into early access back in April of last year, and it landed with mixed reception. It's an ambitious game from Moon Studios, the beloved team behind Ori and the Blind Forest, and expectations were high. The game is trying to do a lot. It blends action RPG mechanics and Souls-like combat and survival tropes layered onto this painted art style that is immediately recognizable. For a game that is still evolving, early access is the right place. It gives the developers the time and the space to be able to gather feedback, experiment, and grow the game alongside their community. But that model only works if there's trust between the players and developers, and unfortunately, trust is in short supply right now. One of the most powerful tools that players have today is the Steam review system, and I'm a huge believer in it.
I hate the Steam review system. Despise it. I think it could lead to very, I mean, there is no other system that could take its place, but I also don't think it works perfectly. I think the fact that you're able to buy a game, leave a negative review, and then refund the game, and the negative review still stays there is a big issue.
Steam reviews are the real last frontier where players can voice their opinions and directly influence a game's success or failure. It's front and center for every store page. Developers cannot bury it, platforms cannot censor it, and that rating carries weight. When a game is mixed or mostly negative, potential players will just walk away entirely, and that's a good thing. It forces these developers to take feedback seriously. It gives power to the players. But that's also a double-edged sword, because anybody can buy a game, leave a review, and then refund it immediately.
He just talked about it pre-watched.
How long the player had played the game, and when they left the review, that thumbs up or thumbs down is still added to the overall score, and that's what's open to abuse. Maybe
they should delete that. They should delete reviews of somebody who refunds games.
Somebody just hates.
Well, I don't know how that would work either.
It's what the developer said on Twitter. Maybe the community turns on them after a bad patch. Maybe somebody rounds up a few friends and some alt accounts and leaves a pile of negative reviews tanking the score. Regardless, All of these reviews are permanent unless they're updated. Even if the game gets better, that old criticism stays locked in unless the player takes the time to go back and revise it. And let's be honest, most players don't.
Yeah, a lot of people are not going to go back. It's like, oh my God, the game is much better. Let me go give it a positive review now. I don't feel like that's going to happen. A lot of people, when they leave a game, they just leave it and they probably don't come back.
That's the problem that Moon Studios ran into. Now, before we dive into this controversy at hand, there is one piece of context that was missing from this conversation and the media coverage, and I think it's it's critically important. It reframes this conversation entirely. After the early access launch, back in April of last year, No Rest for the Wicked went quiet for almost an entire year.
A year.
During that time, Take-Two had announced the sale of Private Division, Moon Studios' publisher, and Moon took a massive financial risk and bought back their publishing rights to go fully independent.
Hey,
that's not just bold, that's expensive. No safety net, no outside funding, just them and whatever they could sell. During that 1 year period, there were little to no updates on the game or discussions around it. That silence wasn't abandonment. It was them cutting ties, regaining control, and preparing to add more content. So when the Breach update for No Rest for the Wicked finally dropped and a wave of mixed criticism followed, it hit differently. Mahler wasn't reacting to normal post-patch criticism. He was watching months of risk and effort threaten to unravel overnight. After launching their new update, a noticeable wave of negative reviews started hitting the Steam page. Moon had already been fixing the performance issues. They were working on the difficulty and responding to player feedback, but some of those reviews still lingered. Thomas Mahler, the studio's co-founder, took to Discord and Twitter to speak out directly to fans, asking people if they enjoyed the game to leave a
manipulating people
positive review. And then he got a bit emotional. On Discord, he wrote, "Folks, if you're writing here and you're enjoying Wicked and are excited for the future updates, but haven't left a positive review, it's entirely possible that we won't be around in a couple of months to do anything anymore simply because we got review bomb, which leads to people not buying the game, which means we're not making any money and we will have to shut down." He followed it up with, "Not sure people understand that they are participating in potentially killing the studio that they want to see succeed by leaving their negative reviews. I get that people think that it's the only way to reach out and get their voices heard, but even companies like GGG won't be able to stomach that review score forever. We've still got a few months left in the oven. If we don't sell copies because people review bomb us, you might just cause our death by leaving that negative review that you posted because you want us to listen to your feedback."
I mean, I know that Thomas didn't mean this to come across as like, oh my God, we're going to shut down. It's more of like the state of the industry and how reviews work, more so that than him saying we're going out of business. He's really trying to get people to acknowledge or at least take notice that reviews are important.
Which we do anyway. I'm reading every fucking feedback that's posted either way. Those quotes were clipped and circulated by media outlets as if they were definitive proof that the studio was blaming its audience, guilt-tripping players, and fear-mongering about reviews. The headlines basically wrote themselves. Developer claims review bombing might kill their studio. But reality, a bit more complicated. When I saw the word review bomb, I checked their Steam page, and I didn't see any sort of mass-coordinated attack. Honestly, most of them were just fair reviews and negative reviews from players that were upset about different mechanics and things of that nature, and at a glance, I could understand why journalists called it a false claim. But then I reached out to Mahler directly, and that led to a nearly 3-hour conversation about what was actually happening behind the scenes.
Well, we did screw up, but we released No Rest for the Wicked, the Breach update, and we tuned the difficulty a little bit too high, right? And then people complained. Within a day, we tuned it down, and now people are really extremely positive, right? But these negative reviews that people posted, they will now exist forever, right? And there's just no mechanisms or nothing in place to keep people updated on what was this review for.
The teeth are so
is this
white,
still applicable even? And there are still literally like 5-6-year-old reviews on Path of Exile, right? And it's like that game that is being reviewed there doesn't even exist anymore. You can't even play that anymore, right? But that always exists now.
That's kind of true, you know? For live service games, that's especially true for live service games that constantly get updates. The Path of Exile reviews that exist for 6 years ago don't make any sense today. Path of Exile 6 years ago is a whole different game than it is today. Same thing with Black Desert Online. Black Desert Online is a game that got negatively reviewed 8 years ago because it had outrageous monetization. It was fucking crazy. But those reviews stay there forever. Reviews should work very differently from a live service game to a game that is just not continued anymore. So I'll give you an example. Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is not a live service game. Those reviews that game gets are fair because it's not a game that is continuously updated. A live service game like The First Descendant or Black Desert or Path of Exile, reviews that were left there 7 years ago are completely irrelevant to what the game is nowadays. The live service games reviews should work differently.
And so even from the press, right? The press always used to do the same thing for 30 years, right? Like a game comes out, they put a review up, right? But we never adapted to, well, some of this criticism gets patched out fairly immediately, right? And especially with games that are under active development, some of the critiques that people have will not even exist anymore by the time it reaches users, you know?
Yeah.
There will be the trolls who just try to get a rise out of you, right?
Yeah.
Everybody goes through that. And so what I saw is there were some people that actively called for an Arrest for the Wicked to be review bombed.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's shitty, right? Like, because, and it's always the same thing, because Thomas Mahler is a Nazi, right? And it's just, oh, fuck you, you know? Like, I literally, all I did was to ask people, like, dude, guys, if you are playing The Arrest for the Wicked actively and you're liking it, please leave a positive Steam review, right? And I thought that was fine. Like, if people enjoy your...
Steam has recent reviews. It's already solved. That said, I do believe permanent reviews aren't bad. Like, Destiny removing content still affecting the game isn't bad. I mean, if it's still an ongoing thing, it isn't bad. But I gave you an example of games that it is bad. Black Desert Online used to have a weight limit, and you used to have to buy that weight limit because of silver that you got from grinding monsters. That hasn't existed in Black Desert for over 6 years. The outrageous monetization that was in Black Desert doesn't exist anymore. None of that exists anymore. It's a whole different game than it was from 8 years ago. And I just think it's unfair for the companies that have improved their games that something like that still stays on their record. I don't think that should work that way. The problem isn't the reviews. The real problem is that people haven't learned to search for recent information, and they always stick with what they searched for 10 years ago. Maybe they should have something else. I don't know. But when you open a review page, it says mostly positive or mostly negative or something like that, right? It affects the whole product. There's still video reviews saying how pay to win BDO is, and this has been addressed on multiple levels. We saw a video last year where a guy was talking about silver having weight, and that has 100,000 subs on YouTube.
Your product?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't even know if it's like something that can be fixed, addressed, or something. But some of these negative reviews stay on the game and on live service games that have been addressed for a long time already.
And they really like it. Then I think it's okay to ask, because I see this on podcasts all the time, right? Like people
It also shows recent review as most positive or negative.
Ask you, hey, like and subscribe, and add us on this thing, blah blah blah, and that's fine, right? Like, but
there's nothing wrong. Like there's nothing wrong with a call to action, and from my perspective, there's nothing.
Also, another thing that is wrong with reviews is if the developer. I'll just give you a wild example. If the developer divorced his wife, why does that have any implication on the review? Because there's people that review and negatively review something because you don't like the stance of the developer. Which is the case with No Rest for the Wicked. When Thomas said, hey, I want everybody to enjoy my game, Ukraine and Russia. Everyone. People got mad and started showing that. And it's because of that just is so stupid to me.
Wrong for a developer to outwardly ask their, the people that are playing their game, that are active in their community, hey, if you've not left a review on this game and you like it, please help support us.
Tell that to Tesla stock. That is a very different thing. If people don't want to buy Tesla stocks and they refunded them, that's a whole different thing, though. Leaving a negative review is something else. You could choose to support whatever you want to support. If you don't want to support him because of his beliefs, that's fine. But then you going out of your way to leave a negative review, that's a whole different thing.
By leaving a positive review, you're not asking for money. You're asking for their genuine feedback on the game that they're enjoying, and that support does directly translate to more sales. It does.
Yeah.
What Mahler was referring to wasn't some grand conspiracy. He had seen some posts online that were actively encouraging review bombing, and he was watching his players were leaving negative feedback, even though those complaints were already being addressed. And the point he was trying to make, clumsily but honestly, is that the Steam score doesn't bounce back on its own. Once it drops, it's incredibly hard to recover, especially for smaller studios without massive marketing budgets or second chances. And that's the real source of the frustration, the permanence of player feedback and press coverage. This is actually what inspired me to make the video in the first place, because I've been increasingly annoyed watching legacy media publish scored reviews for early access games that are clearly not finished, and then they never update them, or they just wait for a 1.0 release regardless of how much time it takes. No Rest for the Wicked sits at a 7 out of 10 on OpenCritic and on Metacritic. All of those reviews are over a year old. None of them have been updated, even though the game has changed significantly. Those scores just sit there. No corrections, no updates, no responsibility, just a scarlet letter for them to carry into every single future sale.
That's also a bad thing, too.
And Mahler knows that. Moon Studios knows that. It's part of the reason why there is so much tension between them and the press. And that tension didn't start with No Rest for the Wicked. It's the very reason why Mahler took to Twitter following a slew of articles saying that the studio was under threat of shutting down, upset over them taking a conversation out of context and using a couple messages on Discord. Mahler doesn't trust the press. Back in 2022, Dean Takahashi of GamesBeat published an article that was accusing Moon Studios of fostering a toxic, oppressive work culture. He cited 2 former employees, both laid off, who claimed that the studio was encouraging bullying, tolerated sexist and racist jokes, and burned out its workers. One of the developers told Takahashi, "I've been at multiple studios now, and Moon is the only one that gave me PTSD about the games industry. I think that they are especially toxic. I've definitely got burned out severely to the point that I would consider a different career path because it was so awful." That article painted Moon Studios as a hostile place to work, highlighting banter between the 2 co-founders, Mahler, an Austrian, and Coral, an Israeli, where they allegedly stereotyped one another in ways that these 2 employees found offensive. Yes, offended by the founders joking about themselves. It was described as problematic without context. 2 men who had been working together for over a decade, taking jabs at each other the same way that siblings would. Moon Studios had responded saying, "We don't believe that the experiences suggested by your questions are representative of the more than 80 Moon Studios team members who are thriving and doing great work every day. We appreciate the irony that we, an Austrian and an Israeli Jew, started this multicultural enterprise. We view each other as brothers. There have been some times that our teasing may have come off as insensitive, and that may have made others feel uncomfortable." Now, I want to be clear. No lawsuits, no formal complaints, no class action, just the word of 2 ex-employees and a mountain of headlines that followed.
I hate people like that. I know, right? Why are you offended on behalf of somebody else? If 2 people are joking with each other because they're friends, it's like shrimp, right? I hate when people come to my stream and they're offended on behalf of fucking shrimp. Like, that's my fucking friend. Like, that's so weird. And I've actually had that in my stream. People actually have gotten offended on behalf of shrimp or something.
Every major outlet regurgitated
Cello, you better shut the fuck up, Cello. I'ma ban your bitch ass.
this same story without any definitive evidence, and 3 years later, it's been total silence. Not a single word about this since then. That story stuck. It shaped perception. It shaped media perception more than anything else. It built this narrative that Moon Studios was toxic, and every misstep since then has been viewed through that lens. This is one of my issues that I have with modern media today, and it's once these claims are made, allegations without no legal investigation, that stigma stays, and it tends to frame future coverage of a studio and their games. Allegations become truth in the court of public opinion especially in the
You know
media.
one thing?
I mean, hell, even
You know, one thing that I really appreciate about Moon Studios, though, and its developers, is that they don't stay quiet. It's something. It's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing and a bad thing. Sometimes I feel like they talk too much, but sometimes that talking too much is actually good. This happens a lot in the industry, and developers, publishers just shut the fuck up. They don't do their best to try to correct anybody, and so then people run away with this image that Ubisoft is the worst company ever. Because Ubisoft doesn't decide to speak about it publicly. Or because this person does this. I appreciate that they talk a lot about it and just like, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Sometimes we need to dial it back. Maybe for a filtration system. I do appreciate Thomas for having no PC language though.
The Kotaku article that's talking about Mahler asking players for positive reviews dropped the VentureBeat allegations at the end of their article, quite literally proving my point. This is meant to influence perception and provoke an emotional response from the reader. We combine this with the fact that Mahler has an outspoken stance against injecting personal politics into their games, and now you have a studio that is just begging to be misunderstood. So with all of that in mind, when Mahler saw the Steam rating dropping, when he saw the negative reviews, the feedback wasn't budging even after fixes, when he started seeing comments online about potential review bombing, when he saw the press corps starting to run articles, he snapped. He responded emotionally, maybe irresponsibly, but not without reason. And that's the problem with early access, because the margin for error is razor thin. One miscommunication or bad patch could cost you your game. One round of bad press could cost you your studio, and all of it is relative to the size of the studio. And given the fact that Moon Studios is a small studio with no big marketing team or communications team, they're a forward-facing developer. You're hearing from the developers from themselves. Well, you have to be ready to listen to them in good faith because, well, their message isn't being cultivated. It's raw. And in some cases, they're going to misspeak, especially when English isn't their first language.
Oh, my Lord. Chad, I promise I did not watch this video.
You know, originally I wanted to make a video that was talking about how we perceive early access games and how the more popular it becomes, the more it's going to invite an audience that is looking for a final product, not looking to support ongoing work. I think Path of Exile 2 is a really good example of this because the game version is 0.2, and they've had some missteps for sure. I'm not going to try to
Path of Exile 2 is dog shit.
protect them from that, but
that's a whole different
story. The game
story.
is a ways off from being complete.
Nah. PoE 2 is different. It's different. When Jonathan sits up there in those interviews and talks the way he does, you can't convince me that guy has a whole different vision than anybody else.
Completed. And you're going to see a lot of people that are talking about the game like it's a permanent failure. And to some people, it already is a permanent failure in their eyes. And that
Mr. Unchosen One says, Elly, another important point is that the rating system on Steam is completely subjective. Most of the time, there aren't actual reviews, but rather personal opinions. The problem with this is that if a game is too difficult, it might get a bad rating, even though the difficulty itself isn't a negative trait. A review and an opinion are entirely different things. You know what? Speak on it. That's actually true. Actually true. Based and true. Like a game being difficult isn't necessarily a bad thing. Hey Elly, let the man speak. Stop it. Like stuff like bugs, glitches, audio design, combat, stuff like that is more objective than subjective. That is what people should scrutinize, where people should critique. The difficulty of a game, I don't know. I guess difficulty could also fall under that if it's like super difficult. I guess it would depend. Yeah. I don't know. But I think there's some truth to your post.
Has an impact on that game's future. And I think that's what makes it really tough from both a player and a developer perspective, because I don't want Steam reviews to change, right? No shot. I don't want that power taken away from us, but I can also understand how nervous it makes a developer seeing a bunch of negative reviews stick to your page and people trying to use that as feedback, not actually as, just leaving a general review. And I understand why they would want that to change, but I don't want that to change. I understand that pressure. I want it to make them nervous, right? But at the same time, depending on the size of the studio, We could very well kill the game because
Yeah.
of doing that. But at the same time, we need that threat because that's useful to us. It's a balancing act more than anything else. From our perspective, it's feedback. From their perspective, it's review bombing. That's the miscommunication that's happened here. It frustrates me to no end that this angle was not explored and that nobody reached out to Moon Studios for comment except for me. The most gracious YouTuber, apparently. I have no idea. But early access is an odd beast. It's still in its infancy. There's a lot that we don't understand, and there's a lot that the developers don't understand. And with more games going into early access, with more developers becoming far more dependent on the players, and also, in a lot of cases, on the media, something has to change. We've seen quite a few incredibly successful games that have gone through early access. Minecraft was an alpha when it launched. You have Ark Survival Evolved, Subnautica, Warframe, Kerbal Space Program 1, Hades, Slay the Spire, and probably the most well-known example right now is Baldur's Gate 3. Early access has quickly become one of the best ways to make games today, and it makes a lot of sense as to why so many developers are adopting this model and why even more of them are going to be doing it in the future. Because by going into early access, you essentially are sidestepping every pitfall of modern game design. You're not gambling with hundreds of millions of dollars on a product you hope people might want. You're selling it to them in real time, directly to your audience, with the flexibility to pivot based on their feedback. If something's not working, you can adjust it. If it is working, you can double down. It's real-time validation. You can scale your budget, you can plan your roadmap, and in some cases, you can skip traditional marketing altogether because if your concept truly resonates, word of mouth is going to carry it further than any marketing campaign. Sometimes that early access will just become a soft launch for something much bigger. Sometimes you'll get one of those weird games that just becomes a phenomenon, like Pal World or more recently Schedule 1, which according to Gamealytics has already sold 5.4 million copies and pulled in nearly $100 million for Tyler. But early access is not all sunshine and W's for players or developers. As Mahler had said, Steam reviews stick, and that permanence is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it holds these studios accountable.
Politics is a perfectly valid reason to dislike a studio game, though. If I can boycott Ubisoft for being DEI, soy boy leftists should be able to boycott games they view as right-wing like Moon. I don't think so. I so hard disagree. What the fuck does the quality of the product have anything to do with who I'm fucking in the middle of the night? I think that is so dumb. I think that's so dumb. It's like if you go to a restaurant to eat food, but the guy that prepared it for you is racist. You can have your negative opinion about the guy who made your food if you want. You might not agree with them, but the food is still good. So how would you leave a negative review on the food that is cooked, the product? Why does that get negatively reviewed, though you enjoyed it and you sat your fat ass there to eat all that food? How does the chef being a racist change that product? I do not agree with that. If you go to a place and a waiter is a 99% racist, of the people would leave a negative review regardless of the food. Well, I mean, if the waiter is coming to you and is saying, hey, get out of here, you Mexican, or what do you want, you Mexican? That's a whole different opinion. You can leave a negative review based off of your experience in that restaurant. You can say, I had a bad experience here. They hire racists to be my waiter. I think it's really disgusting the way they carry their business. The food was great, but that's a whole different story. You don't get that from like a video game, though. That's a whole different subject. Food was great, but someone called me a cracker. Nah, I don't agree. I think someone's views of life shouldn't come into play when the product is being delivered. No, the product is what you're reviewing. And I don't agree that if somebody's politics don't line up with yours, you're good to leave a negative review. I disagree with that, but I mean, not everybody agrees with me, and that's why it still exists, and people review bomb all the time because they don't like that somebody doesn't grow hair on the top of their head.
Well, but
I think that is so dumb because it has no bearing on the final product.
Other hand, That label, mixed or mostly negative, once it sets in, especially for some of these smaller titles, it can be devastating. A game like Path of Exile 2 can definitely weather the storm. Most people understand the context. They trust grinding gear
Mostly negative for PoE 2?
games, and they know that the game is going to improve over time. Most people
So this is all reviews are mostly positive. Recent reviews are mostly negative. So they do have a distinction or a separation, but I still think people look at this as a wider picture and they're like, yeah. I still think that having both of these displayed is kind of bad. I think recent reviews are probably a better way to go about it. And recent reviews as in like 1 week or a month. They should have a timeline.
understand the context. They trust grinding gear games, and they know that the game is going to improve over time, but not every studio has that luxury. For smaller studios or solo developers, a negative review score can kill their momentum, funding, and in most cases, the entire project. Now, yes, Steam does show both recent and overall reviews, and yes, it clearly puts a label saying that this game is early access right on the front of the page, but let's be honest, most people aren't reading any of that stuff. They look at the price, they glance at the rating, and they judge the game like it's finished. If it plays like an early build, to them, they're going to treat it like it's a broken one. And that's where these wires are starting to get crossed. From the developer side, reviews can feel like a minefield, especially when there's no clear way to communicate or get some of those reviews changed, even if they're complaining about something that's already fixed. If they're not visibly responding to player concerns, reviews and sales are going to tank. But when developers do engage,
has not improved.
and do it sincerely, it can
Actually,
make
PO2 has improved, right? It has improved.
a difference. That's what happened with Moon Studios. After Mahler had asked players to leave positive reviews if they were honestly enjoying the game, their score skyrocketed. It didn't come from a PR spin or marketing spin. It came from being direct, vulnerable, and asking the community to speak up and support them. From the player side, though, the review system isn't just a scoreboard, it's a pressure valve. Players just want to be heard. Steam reviews, unfortunately, are often the only place where we can be. I actually brought this up to Mahler when we were talking about early access because I think that Helldivers 2 is the best example of how powerful that system can be. If Steam players hadn't pushed back, if they hadn't review bombed the game that they love, Sony would have never walked back their forced PlayStation login. It didn't save the game from being pulled from over 180 countries, but it did stop them from forcing players to sign up for Sony's data harvesting.
I just want to point that out, that the developers going on a crusade for better reviews has led the game to be very positive, chat. Let's go! Very positive. Hey, great game, chat. Great game. Take that, cute dog.
A lot of cases, our only option is to go after your money. So whether it's a passionate plea from developers or a protest from players, the Steam review system means something. That's what makes it so powerful and fragile. And while I think it's crucial to have this kind of power, I've also seen it misused, even with good intentions. I've read negative reviews that feel more like love letters. I really enjoy this game. Here are all the things that I love, but here are a few things that I want to fix. No hate, no outrage, just feedback. But when there's no proper in-game system for that and no visible developer response on forums or Discord, the review system becomes the default megaphone because at least there, someone might actually listen. This is also why I want to push back a little on Mahler's perspective, because while I understand the frustration and yes, the danger of seeing these reviews drag down a game that's still evolving, a lot of that negative feedback that I was reading wasn't malicious. It was well-voiced criticism, players that were calling out things like time-gated crafting systems, pacing problems, and balance issues that hadn't been addressed. That kind of feedback deserves to be seen. It deserves to stay. If those reviews are what are pushing your team to make improvements, then they did exactly what they were supposed to. If those reviews are reasons why a player quit playing the game, they deserve to be a warning to the next player that comes to buy that game.
Is the FPS low,
now, from my perspective, the problem isn't that those reviews exist. It's that once changes are made, there's no real system in place to surface that progress unless the reviewer goes back to update their initial review. But most aren't going to do that, not out of spite, just because the moment of engagement has passed and they've likely forgotten and probably won't.
So I think we kind of get the gist of this video, chat. We're not going to react to all of it.
They don't know that they're buying a game. They're not even thinking about the viral success.
So my takeaways from this video, Steam reviews are good. Steam reviews are great. Not everybody has $60 to like $120 now, what some video games cost to drop on a game. And some people rely on reviews to kind of sway them a certain type of way. So reviews aren't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, even it could help developers make better games and do better decisions. Like the Helldivers point that this guy brought up. Helldivers is a pretty good example of the community fighting back and having them change something for the better, like the whole PlayStation Network thing. So that was a victory. But then you have people who involve their politics into stuff. Because I'll give you an example. Moon Studios from No Rest for the Wicked doesn't want to pick any sides between the wars that are happening in this world. Instead, they want to just develop a game. But people are allowed to purchase a game, leave a negative review because they don't like that they didn't choose either Ukraine or Russia. They would buy a game, leave a review, and refund. That is something that can happen. Now, do I think that most people are doing that? I don't think they are. I don't think they're actually doing that. But that just tells you that there's a flaw in the system. How would they fix this? I don't really know how someone would go about fixing this, but it is a little bit weird, especially when you're thinking about an ongoing game, a live service game that has continuous updates. A good example is Path of Exile. Path of Exile has been out for over 10 years. Some of the negative reviews that are still on that game are from like 7 years ago. Path of Exile is a whole different game than it was 8 years ago or 7 years ago. And these reviews stay there. Yes, they do have two sides to it, like this right here. Very positive and mostly positive reviews. Sure, somebody with a brain could come here and says, well, let's see what their most recent reviews are, etc., etc. You could go and do that, but I feel like not a lot of people are going to do that. They're just going to read negative or do this or mostly negative. And they're like, well, I don't want to buy this game anymore. It could, and it only takes for the developer to do one tweet that nobody liked. Oh my God, this developer likes enchiladas, red enchiladas, and I'm a green enchilada enjoyer. Let me go leave a negative review now. It's great that gamers have power, but with great power comes great responsibility. And there are way too many fucking retards out there with too much power. And that is where I end this one. Hey, I kind of need a little bit of help. How about you help me out? Hit that follow, subscription button, all the good stuff. Yeah, comment and like, possibly, maybe. Please.